Hello, everybody, and welcome to World Talks here on TVP World. My name is Don Arleth. The Istanbul Convention, formerly known as the Council of Europe Convention on Preventing and Combating Violence Against Women and Domestic Violence, is a human rights treaty established by the Council of Europe. It was opened for signature back in 2011 in Istanbul, Turkey, and it seeks to prevent violence, protect victims, and hold perpetrators accountable. As of March 2019, the treaty had been signed by 45 countries and the European Union. But some have left the convention, such as Turkey, deciding to replace the document with domestic legislation. And on Thursday, Latvia's parliament suddenly decided to leave the convention, sparking protests and calls to delay the final decision until the next parliament, which will be voted in next fall. And now joining me to discuss the future of this convention in Latvia and the protection of women against violence is Beata Jonite, Head of Policy and Advocacy at the MARTA Centre. Hello, Beata,
Hello.
and thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, now, where did this idea to withdraw from the Istanbul Convention come from, and why now? I've seen in other publications that you've cited pure populism.
Yes, that we do see it as civil society as the only reason for doing it at the moment, because we would understand if there was some catalyzing event or someone tried to change the national constitution and, I don't know, change the meaning of family or something else, but actually nothing happened to cause this. This came completely out of the blue. Us as an organization that is helping victims of violence, has been doing it for 25 years. We were fighting for the convention for many, many years, and it finally got ratified. And honestly, the past 3 years or so since we were on the way to the convention and had the convention have been revolutionary in this field, because more laws have changed than ever before. We finally have, state-funded crisis shelter, and emotional abuse is criminalized. We finally have a definition for sexual harassment. We finally have a national action plan. We have increased punishment as well for crimes that have to do with violence and domestic violence. So we had just been calmly doing our work, and suddenly, I think it was September 23rd when we found out this was going to be on the agenda of the parliament. It fell from the sky. And the biggest surprise is that we had known that this party, Latvia First, that proposed this denunciation of the convention, we knew that they were against it. But we were honestly in a pure shock that so many of our parties that we do consider to be patriotic, that we do consider to have our state's best interest, at heart, that they kind of fell for this populism and went with this initiative. And then last Thursday, of course, the vote itself happened. However, we do see now that it is on hold because the president did not sign it. So yes, this really has shown the force of civil society in our country. This has shown the force of protests and how much we can actually impact as individuals if we want to.
Well, when this news, really broke and became, a bigger news piece, my first reaction was, does this have something to do with Russia? Because, if we look back, 10, 12 years ago when Russia did away with all of these laws that were protecting women from domestic violence, this is just the first thing that caught into my head. Is there a Russian connection here?
We can't say for sure that there's a Russian connection because there's no proof of it technically or financially, but the narratives are strikingly similar because we do see that ever since the Istanbul Convention itself was created and opened for signature in 2011, there have been very similar narratives spreading all throughout different European countries. And then I think it's really clear, also looking at the map of what countries have ratified this convention and which countries haven't, which countries are then in that sense more resilient to propaganda and which are less resilient. And 2023, the ratification really was a victory where our prime minister, who honestly, thanks to her, we even ratified this, but our prime minister and other politicians stood and said, we will stand above this disinformation. We will stand above these lies. For us, victims, And our reputation as a country means a lot more than going along with these false narratives. And what we're seeing now is that despite all logic, despite all sense, despite every single expert standing up and speaking, saying exactly the same things, that the convention is there to protect women. No, it does not impose the necessity to change the meaning of family. No, it has nothing to do with men going in women's toilets, or I've heard, honestly, at this stage, every possible bizarre argument you could even imagine. Every single expert, international judge, national judge, everyone is saying the same thing. And our politicians are refusing to listen. And I think this is also, in a way, a crisis of democracy, and kind of shows this move towards post-reality and post-truth, where no one is listening to people who actually know what they're talking about anymore. Politicians are making up their own minds and their own opinions purely for their own political gain and for clicks on TikTok, instead of actually helping their country.
Let's go into the gender ideology thread, if you will. How does the framing of this gender ideology by the opponents of the convention influence public perception and political discourse in Latvia, and even, I don't know, in neighboring countries like in Lithuania or in Hungary?
I think it's mostly fear-mongering, because we know that these minority groups, they have always existed. They will always exist in history. It's a very small percentage of people, but they are made into this frightening, huge thing, when in reality, it's really not that big. So personally, I am really against using marginalized small groups of minorities against something like this. But the main thing is that the convention has nothing to do with these topics. So we hear all sorts of arguments, which I can understand how people can believe them. And if not believe, then they're frightened, because when a politician stands up there in parliament and says, your children will be taken away if you don't allow them to change genders in kindergarten, which of course, nothing in the convention, not a single word, states that, then of course people will get scared, and people will start worrying and thinking, oh, something must be wrong with this international treaty, when in reality none of these things are actually true. So yeah, sadly, we do see this issue of gender being completely misunderstood. The convention is an international treaty. It should be interpreted according to how international treaties are interpreted. It has an object and a purpose. The object and purpose of this international treaty is protecting victims against violence, gender-based violence, domestic violence. It doesn't have anything to do with trans rights, with gender change, with any of these topics. And this is just a tactic to emotionally split apart society. But I think the most important thing is that that part of society that believes these narratives is also a bubble, because sociological reports actually show that most Latvians support staying in the convention. We also see this now with us organizing protests. We have never historically had such an uprising of people against this nonsense. There's no other way to call this. And this does not reflect the opinion of most Latvians. It's a very loud bubble on TikTok, on Twitter, on social media, but it's by no means most Latvians or all of our country. So for me as a Latvian, it hurts to see how we are now seen also on the international arena as a perpetrator, because, all the headlines say Latvia withdraws from international treaty protecting victims against violence. And that is absolutely tragic and just an absolutely reckless step on behalf of those politicians, those 56 people who voted this way.
Right. Well, thankfully, it's still not the case. We're almost out of time, so I just want to know, A, is this going to be a major issue in the upcoming parliamentary elections next year? And then B, what do you expect from these protests? I hear there's more protests planned for today.
So, yes, I do believe it's going to be a big issue in the next parliament. And as civil society, of course, we are a little disappointed that instead of this parliament voting to stay in the convention, this question is now shelved. And it will be up to 100 people in our parliament that we don't know yet because they haven't been yet elected in a year. So this issue will continue staying on the agenda and people will continue talking about it. And again, this is just an international treaty. It has done so much good. It's, so many, 39 countries have ratified it in total now, and there's no reason to pull out of it. So it's sad that this is going to allow for these games with people's lives to continue for another year and probably more. And as for the protests, yes, today is going to be the main protest that we've been organizing together. I will be also leading this protest, and this, I think it's going to be honestly unprecedented since the times of the national awakening in the 90s, because Latvians do not protest very often. We're a very reserved nation that doesn't often go and take to the streets. So we think there's going to be many thousands of people outside today. And there's also protests not only in Riga, but in 3 other cities in Latvia. There's protests in 3 states in the US. There's protests in Stockholm, Oslo, Vienna, Brussels, London, Paris, all across Europe. So our diaspora also stands with us. And I think that is incredibly powerful.
Absolutely, it is, and a very important issue. I'd like to thank you, Beata Jonite, Policy and Advocacy at MARTA Centre. Thank you so much for joining us, and of course, best of luck to you in your mission.
Thank you so much.
And that concludes this edition of World Talks. Thank you all for joining us, and stay with us for more here on TVP World.